Hello and welcome back, everybody, to the DanJohnUniversity.com podcast. I'm Dan John, and this is episode 280. Each and every week, I sit down and answer your questions. And listen, if you have a question, please send them to the podcast at this address, podcast@DanJohnUniversity.com. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. We have a real good set today. A lot of them are pretty simple answers, but I'll, as always, do my best to talk and drone on and on and on, like someone said in the comments not long ago. We have a question from Yves, and he says, I purchased your book, Armor Building Formula, which was a delight to read. Yeah, you gotta love that, thank you so much. It's as enjoyable as listening to your podcast, perhaps even more. So yeah, between my podcast and the ABF, somebody told me one time that reading my books sounds like me talking, which made me kind of laugh because I think that's the way it should be. For those who don't know the Armor Building Formula, just type in armorbuildingformula.com and you'll get it. You'll be able to purchase it there. I'm 2 weeks into the program, so depending if the Kettlebell one, you're moving into those ABA, BAB workouts and love it. I was on the program with double 22s, but I reduced weight to double 20s for press and increased to double 24s for the ABC. You've got a good home gym or wherever you're at. It's got a lot of equipment. I feel like I'm already stronger, but I've never been as hungry as in those past 2 weeks. So the first 2 weeks with the break-in program, I don't think any of the workouts by themselves are hard, but you're asked to do a lot of work. You're going to do a lot of presses, you can do a lot of squats. And honestly, if you want hypertrophy, increased lean body mass, it's squat and press. If you want to get hungry, it's squat and press. What would you recommend for a cutting phase after completing the ABF and before starting a new round of it? It's that good with higher weights. So recently, and it's over on the site, and by the time it comes up, we'll have it even easier to get to. But the supplement is out, and I do recommend, really, for people who want to do another round of it, the first thing I recommend is, so you finish the 8-week program. We'll just say it's the 8-week program. Okay. So week 9 and even week 10, I would just kind of back off. I have a program here on YouTube called The Perfect Workout. It's half kneeling presses, hangs. It's hip thrusts or Bulgarian goat bags. It can be swings, the goblet squat into the overhead squat and suitcase carries. It really is several different exercises put together, and they all of them work on your hypertrophy and your mobility, and they're fairly, I hate to say easy, but you're working two things at once. With, for example, the half kneeling press, you're stretching out your hip flexors, at least the way I do them, and you're also building up those really key important overhead pressing muscles. And because your body is a little bit in a weird position, you're stressing your stabilizers up and down the system. Every exercise is a twofer. Obviously, goblet squats and overhead squats, you're going to chase your mobility, but with the goblet squats, you're also going to chase what I call a moving plank. That's what I recommend for 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, I want you to kind of cobble together your ideas of what you're going to try next. In your case, with you moving up and down with the clearly, I'd like to see you move to the presses, the heavier presses, the next go around. But it'll be interesting on this because by the time maybe you get to 8 weeks, that 24 might be too easy already. You also have some options the next time around of doing asymmetrical ABCs, where you have, say, a 24 on one side and a 20 on the other, depending on what equipment you have. And then you switch every single round, you switch sides. But I do like the option of going heavier. One other thing, and I say about this in the supplement, don't be afraid when you go heavier in the press to do sets like 2-3-5, 2-3-5, or even 2-3, 2-3, 2-3. Because if you're going to up the weight, a lot of people just can't handle the higher volume, like the 10s and stuff. But we want sometimes you to chase those heavier weights until you get, stronger, I guess. Not the best statement I've ever made in my life. So, coach, why do we lift weights? To get stronger. Ah, okay. Well, but it's true. But thank you so much, and a great question. We followed this up with a question from Brian, and I'm always interested. I've heard about this before, but I got to tell you, I got a personal stake in this one. Brian says this: I signed up for the Bataan Death March on March 22nd, 2025. It's a 26.2 mile ruck with a minimum of 35 pounds at the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. I feel like I've heard this before, but I just got to say this. My Uncle Robert was in the Bataan Death March, and I don't know how to say this at all. And by the way, he also had a horrible death in an auto accident, which, I just remember so well because my mom, first off, her heart was broken again, which she sadly, anybody who went through the World War II, the Depression, that Spanish flu outbreak, Vietnam, Korea, she had seen a lot in her life, and it impacted her brothers, her husband, and her sons. So when I see something like that, I'm always like, yeah, I understand why you're doing it, but a little bit of me puts me back in, what was I, 8 or 9 when Uncle Robert died, and her talking about how messed up he was from that ordeal. I'm hoping you can help me with a training plan or point me in the direction of one, since I've never done a competition like this. I have a home gym consisting of a Go Ruck Rucker, lots of kettlebells and dumbbells, adjustable bench, pull-up bar, TRX, that's great, ab wheel, and Concept 2 rower. Very similar to what I have. I was thinking about sticking with 4 to 5 days of the workout genre while rucking 1 to 2 miles per week over the next few months. After the holidays, I plan to increase my rucking and maybe switch to easy strength for kettlebells so I can focus more on logging miles to train for the event. Is this a good plan? I've never done a competition like this. Well, let me just take you right now. You're on DJU, danjohnuniversity.com. In there is a program. It's called the mountain climbing program or something like that. And I got to tell you, I think that's what you want to do. There's seesaw presses in there. There's suitcase presses. I talk about preparing yourself the last week. As I always say to people, if you've been preparing for 6 to 12 weeks for a competition, that last week, all you can do is screw things up. I'm going to recommend in that program that you really, you take care of shoe care early, feet care, shoe care early. You get yourself used to wearing that. I think you're going to have to early be wearing that 35 pounds, which is a little bit over what I'd usually recommend, but this is a contest, a challenge, so you have to do it. But I want you to work your way up to just getting used to carrying that, having a shoe, it's kind of weird to say, a foot, sock, shoe system that can deal with a marathon distance with 35 pounds. You're going to have issues with your feet, socks, and shoes because of the extra load. I also have in the mountain climbing program hill sprints. I want you to get out and walk a lot. I would say the best thing I can tell you, Brian, the mountain climbing program there on the site. I put it together for somebody who had no time to get ready for he's a writer for a magazine and was told he needed to do this hard climb, and it worked out really well. I am no climbing expert, but I think I'm good on getting people ready for challenges. So that's my recommendation to you. I feel bad for those of you who don't know the mountain climbing program. I know I have it in a couple of my books because I'm not a big believer, for most people most of the time, in getting ready to peak or to do something, because most of us, generally I say about 8 months of the year, you should go to the gym 3 to 5 times a week, walk every day, sleep, eat protein and veggies, it's very basic stuff. And maybe 2 bouts, I don't know how long it is, but when I say the other 4 months, it could be 2-month, 8-week programs. It could be however it works out with your schedule, a 1 month, turn the page thing. Some of us, I don't recommend it. We use the month of January to undo all the damage of the previous year, and of course we know that statistically that doesn't work. 3 months getting ready for a wedding or an event like this, I think that works out really well. So there's the program. Obviously, I can't give all the details on it, not because I don't want to, but the entire podcast with me going through week 2, Monday, and I just don't think that's something we need to do. Take the last week's prep really seriously. I'm going to recommend you take a lot of orange-flavored, sugar-free Metamucil that last week. I'm going to tell you to make sure you get your sleep in, especially day 7, day 6, day 5, day 4 before the event. A lot of times people struggle sleeping the night before, but if you only have one bad night sleep is nothing, but compound that with 7 and you're in trouble. I hope that helps. Make sure you think about a hydration system. I'm guessing it's going to probably take, I could imagine you'll have competitors around the 8-hour mark. I don't know what the time limit on this thing is, but you're not going to see a lot of people. You're not going to see a lot of people rucking with 35, worrying about breaking the 2-hour barrier on a marathon. I don't know if you could do it in 3, but I would imagine 4 to 8 hours. So obviously in 4 to 8 hours, there's going to have to be, bathroom breaks. There's going to have to be food. You're going to have to figure out a way to keep the drinking up. I had that great conversation years ago with Phil Maffetone, where he said that even drinking water is going to be an issue on getting people under a 2-hour marathon time. And I thought, he's right, because, water has weight, and when you add that weight to the system, you have a heavier body. I thought that was interesting. When you get to the edge of athletic performance, you have to think about how much water you drink during the performance as it adds weight. Good luck on this, and really glad you're using the workout generator most of the time. But for this example, let's get you on that mountain climbing program. Thank you. Eric has a question, and I'm just going to say yes, but let's get through the question. I am fortunate to have a sled that I can pile weights onto and push or pull as desired. I find this training doesn't aggravate my ankle, whereas squats, cleans, kettlebell, and barbell, and kettlebell swings often do generate ongoing but manageable pain. That's interesting, that swings, that's why I reread it again, bother an injured ankle. I'd like to see your technique. There might be something real simple, but hey, if it hurts, it hurts. Are sled pushes and pulls adequate substitutes for squats, cleans, and swings for leg and posterior chain training? What would I lose if I transitioned to more sled-focused training? How would you recommend loading the sled and incorporating the sled training into my program to alleviate the wear and tear on my ankle? Do you feel pushing or pulling is superior, or is a 50-50 mix a reasonable way to go? A lot of questions there. But basic comes down to this. For the majority of people who read and listen to my materials, I would have to say that if I could get you just doing hill sprints, I think all your dreams come true. I'm a massive believer in hill sprints. Now, why am I talking about hill sprints? Because sled pulls are hill sprints for those of you who don't live in a mountain range like I do. I think sled pulls, and most people call them prowler now, but sled push is fine. I think they're marvelous. When I was rehabbing my hip replacement, my right one with Mitch Cook, he had me doing goblet squats followed by sled pull, followed by push-up, followed by goblet squat, followed by sled push, followed by push-up. I mean, it was a marvelous combination. I know squats hurt your ankles, but what I was getting is I was getting great rehab. I think, this is gonna kill my. I don't own any equipment, but if I was an equipment manufacturer, I'd be really angry about what I'm about to say. I think if you could incorporate, like I know I've done it in Island Pond, Vermont a number of times because there's a perfect hill to do this. In my hometown of South San Francisco, there was a perfect hill to do this. But if you can walk, I don't know, let's say 400 meters, a quarter mile, and then have a real hard hill. So you walk, hard hill, walk, hard hill, walk, hard hill. I'm prone to hyperbole, but I think that's a perfect workout. I mean, it's just, you get both sides of the power law of human performance. And I've never had an athlete get hurt going up hills, ever. Sometimes with bleachers and stuff. And a tired athlete doing old school bleachers, there was always a chance that you fall forward and you catch your hands. But now some of the facilities now with those really hard aluminum seats, I worry a little bit. But if you can find a way to do sled pulls, especially, I think that really works. I mean, I think it's a marvelous exercise for you said posterior chain, and I love it. But it is truly a great glute workout. And it also teaches that style of hit that I think is so helpful in athletic performance. On sled pushes, I think there's the same benefits, but there is one issue with both of them: overloading the sled until it becomes just this grind. When we get down to the bottom here, when you ask about loading the sled, I think you load the sled as heavy as you can, as long as it's still, the feet are going boom, 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 boom. If it goes, okay, for those of you listening in your cars or whatever, this must sound really odd. But if you're grinding, I'm not a big fan. I've been to a gym where a guy would put every 100-pound plate in the gym and do prowlers. And I used to always think, to the point that he was almost, I mean, a few degrees to being parallel to the ground. And every single step was a grind. But I didn't see the value in that, because unless you're pushing a wheeled refrigerator up a hill, no time in life are you ever going to use that. And when you're out on the field of play, the feet go not most of the time. So I can't really tell you how much load, because it's impossible, because of friction. If you're on AstroTurf, you can use a lot more weight than if you're on dirt. If you're on asphalt, which destroys the sleds, by the way, and I can tell you that because that's what I did out front. If you're on if you're on asphalt, it might have a different consistency than dirt. Certainly, if you're on a sandy beach and you're pulling a sled, it's gonna be a lot different than if you're on AstroTurf. Years ago, when I was working a lot more with Jim Jones, they had this challenge where they would run up hills dragging sleds, and I always thought that was a really interesting idea. Be more reasonable. Now, you ask about this, what's better, pushing or pulling? They're both good. You might, if you can set it up, and I think to me it logically works, is you sled pull this way and sled push back. I think that would be really fun. I've always personally gotten more out of sled pulls. Personally, I've gotten less out of sled pushes, and it might be because of my background in the Olympic lifts. Whereas I do that, it's like, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well, take a weight and throw it over my head. Your mileage may vary. Eric, the answer is yes. I love them. And I'd really like to know what kind of ankle injury you have that allows you to do sled pushes and sled pulls, but not swings. It's just a thing. I don't know what I just can't imagine why that would be an issue. But thank you, Eric. Great question. And folks, if you can think about this, all the other listeners, if you can find a place in your neighborhood or close to you that you can get a walk, and 400 meters is probably too far, but a 200-meter walk followed by a nice, short, hard hill, I think you'll really start to see wonderful benefits. The thing is, you want your heart to be completely back normal, but you want yourself not to be in that panic the next time you hit the hill. And every hill sprint has to be all out. And then when you hit the crest, you just kind of stop and you walk away. When you can start talking intelligently again, go up the hill. All right, good luck. Thank you. Brian says this: I've seen some videos on isometric training, and I'd like to know your thoughts on the subject, if any. Would also appreciate if you can cite other sources of information on the subject. Most of the sources I have, I don't even think are in print anymore. I have in here somewhere the book Functional Isometric Contraction for American Football. And then I have a couple of other isometric books. I haven't seen a lot of good stuff on isometrics since the early 1960s. And then Dragon Door came out with the ISO chain, which I actually helped because when I got mine, I broke the handle on the very first day, not the handle, but the clip the very first day. And it was fun making that phone call to John Duquesne. When he suddenly realized that, someone who can deadlift, and I was up here at that high position where, I'm kind of, that's my wheelhouse, as the cool kids say. After we did that test at the Olympic Training Center, I'm very strong in that quarter to eighth squat position. I mean, that's one of the reasons I could throw so well, is I'm really strong there. And when I put the weight there, it's going to be hard for most little hooks to hold on. I think the book they have over in Dragon Door on the ISO chain is actually pretty good. I liked it a lot. And it brought back a lot of materials from the early time. You might be able to find on eBay some of the FIC books, Functional Isometric Contraction. But let me just give you the bottom line. The problem with isometrics, and they knew it from back then, and if you read the research, I think it goes all the way back to the 1930s. It's also in the Physiology of Strength. Is like everything in our world, isometrics work really well for about 6 weeks, and then you max it out. The Physiology of Strength, the reason I like it so much is, those German scientists were doing things like having people lift, taking 12 weeks off, and then seeing how long it took them to get back to their old numbers. On the isometric chapters in the Physiology of Strength, they'll talk about how certain muscles really quickly respond to isometrics. The calves, the glutes, the deltoids, the shoulders really respond quickly. And I always thought that tied in well to what Yonda was talking about with his tonic and phasic muscles. And so years ago, and I've talked about this in a couple of my books, Dave Turner helped me. I had a sticking point in my clean recovery, and Dave figured it out to be exactly, I don't have it in centimeters, I'm sorry, but it was 34 inches exactly was my sticking point. And so I bought sawhorses, and I put my barbell on it, and I could barely stand up with 135 pounds, 60 kilos, the first workout, because that was the point where kind of like my nervous system didn't know what to do, because I'd always been bouncing out of my front squats. So this is why I think isometrics is so important. I mean, I was strong, but I had taught my body to ignore this range of a lift. I think isometrics, their great gift is that you find that weak range and you put the load exactly at it, and you can train through. And if you know my story, 6 weeks later, same position, and they were called dead stops. So you put the bar on the 34-inch sawhorse, and then you pull yourself underneath it, and you stand up. Well, honestly, my nervous system had no idea what are you doing here? I mean, my brain's going, go, and they're like, what do you mean by that? It's like, you sit down to a piano and someone yells out, Warsaw Concerto. A, I don't know what that is. B, I don't know how to play the piano. Go! The fate of the universe is on this. Oh, okay, 6 weeks later, I stood up from that 34-inch with 365 pounds And I never missed a clean recovery the rest of my career. And that includes as I'm sitting here right now, because I taught my body. Now, after that, it had no value. And Dave Turner was real clear with me on it. He said, yeah, that's it. You're going to be done with it. You know, I'm working on a thing right now called the geometry of success. And I talk about Dave. I'll make sure I get that information into that piece. I don't know if it's a book or just a thing for the site, but it's been fun. So isometrics work. They work well. And you have 6 meets. You have 6 weeks, or 6 meets, I guess. Yeah. You have about 6 weeks to get the full benefits. After that, now, you can certainly, if you're going to run with it, you then adjust to a different height, or go higher, go lower on the movement, and maybe that'll work. Can you do a whole program with just isometrics? I think so, if you constantly keep that information in the back of your mind. You build yourself up to a pretty heavy load, either by the feedback from the iso chain or by the barbell. Then you find a new position. 6 weeks, build it up, find a new position. I know it works well with front squats and presses. I think it would work well with deadlifts and squats. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, I know people, and I've got our, maybe I don't anymore because I threw all up. I used to have a big collection of Muscular Development magazine. They had some articles. I probably kept those because they had pictures of Bill March. But, isometrics for bodybuilding, I don't even know why it was discussed, because hypertrophy demands, well, the word we use now is time under tension or time under load. Strength is just a neurological trick, I mean, obviously there are other factors too, but so you can get strong with isometrics, no question about it. But for hypertrophy, I don't. Now, having said this, what if you had you're using your bench press? You want to look, you want to build up this part of your body with the bench press, but because of the way your limbs are, you have a sticking point, say here off your chest. After 6 weeks of isometrics, you've added 50 pounds to your max bench. Then you go over into a hypertrophy program. Then I think it's really going to work. So for hypertrophy, isometric to deal with the sticking point, then go back to traditional bodybuilding programs. For strength, you find the spot you got a gap at, you fix it, you test your full movement. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, keep searching. Hope that helped, Brian. Thank you. This is strange. We have another question from Brian. Brian, I'm starting to think there's a conspiracy here. I'm a budding endurance athlete who will spend the next 6 months progressively developing my cardio endurance so I can do Olympic triathlons next summer. I am interested in integrating a kettlebell-based strength program in parallel with my cardio as a way of being stronger and preventing injury. Do you have recommendations for a kettlebell strength program I could do 2 days a week? Currently, I'm looking at doing circuits with a push-pull, squat, hinge, and carry exercise one day, full body, while doing a classic kettlebell program the other day. And he feels that shoulder mobility is helpful for his swimming. Would you consider another approach, as do you have any resources I could use for programming? Yeah, personally, I think you should do the armor building formula. Yeah, I don't. Now, the one thing the armor building formula doesn't have in it is carries. And I do think loaded carries would have great value. So make sure you toss in suitcase carries. Now, you're only going to do this 2 days a week. So one thing I'd recommend, get the book Armor Building Formula, but where it says, once you get past the first 2 weeks, and you could even do it then, is you take those 3-day workouts and you do them 2 days. So, for example, you might go ABC on Monday, the high rep presses on Thursday. The next week, there you go. There's your program. ABC on Monday, high rep presses and suitcase carries, and just go through the program that way. doing circuits, circuits are fine. I like complexes better for what you're chasing. For those of you new to lifting, that might sound like I just use a lot of terms that sound the same. But a complex is a series of exercises where the bar never leaves your hand. Circuits tend to be do this exercise followed by this exercise followed by that exercise. And you move from machine to machine or piece of equipment to piece of equipment. I hope it helps, and I think it's a good program. And, the key is in the doing, not in the talking. Good luck to you on that, Brian. We have a question from Paco, and Paco says this. I have been following the ABC program, which I absolutely love for its simplicity. However, I have poor shoulder range of motion, and whenever I move my arms overhead, I feel like I compensate by overbending my lower back. I'm concerned this might be a problem in the long run. Given this, do you think it's better to continue with the ABC program or focus on improving my shoulder mobility first to avoid any potential injuries? Well, that's why I hang every day, is to keep my shoulders healthy. The thing, Paco, I don't see here, I don't see why your shoulders have bad range of motion. Is it from an injury or from doing push-ups and bench press your whole life or whatever it is? Have you tried to do anything for your shoulder mobility? I mean, my sauna is right there. When I'm in my sauna, I do shoulder mobility work every time. Then I go in my gym and I do my hangs, and then I keep testing it. Because shoulder mobility, to me, like hip flexors, these are like givens because the modern American lifestyle tends to make it that your shoulder mobility and your hips are just constantly getting tighter and tighter. So yes, you should be working on your shoulder mobility. As for the issues with the press, one small thing that can help some people is if you have a weightlifting belt, crank that thing on, and not necessarily to help the lower back, but to give a sense of, are you really excessively arching? I get great feedback on my weightlifting belt, the one I use in competition. I pop that on, tighten it up, and when I'm doing presses sometimes, I'll notice, like you say, I start to kind of do vertical bench presses when I'm using a barbell here. But as the load gets heavier, I start to lean back more and more. The nice thing about my weight belt is it digs into my skin and gives me feedback. So yes, work your shoulder mobility. Also, try that little trick with the weight belt and just see where it's happening. Now, if it's not happening on the first rep, it's not happening on the second rep, but it's happening on the fifth rep, you're doing little Danny John's trick of turning the military press into the vertical bench press. And it's not a good idea. I mean, I can get away with it because I've been doing it so long, I guess, but I shouldn't do it. And that's something I consciously work on. Okay, thanks. Fun question. Mohith writes this question. People talk about the what the heck effect with kettlebell swings, but I think there should be more what the heck effect discussion of kettlebell clean and press. What are your thoughts on this? Mohith, I agree 100%. There's a good conversation on one of the forums I discuss online, and they've kind of come to a fun conclusion, at least so far in this conversation, that for most people, most of the benefits would be the clean and press. I mean, you look at the armor building formula which is based on the armor building complex, a brilliant workout and program developed by me. You'll notice there's lots of clean and presses. You'll also notice that whenever I tell people how to get ready for a kettlebell certification, I send them right back to the rite of passage, which is the clean and press. When I first came online, in fact, some people still make fun of me for saying this, but if all you did, I said, was the Olympic bar clean and press, you'd be pretty awesome like the guys in the 60s. I got that from a piece of advice I gave myself when I was 14. It's funny to think about it because I'm older. When I was 14, I wrote down in my journal, which I showed the other day, in one of my last podcasts, that 50 years from now, which would have made me 64, and I'm much older than that now, which is funny, that if all I did was clean and press and squat snatch, I would be just fine. Why I find that funny is that when I focus on the clean and press and the squat snatch, I'm doing pretty good. When I do the other stuff, I'm fine, but those two give me the most bang for the buck. So I agree with you 100%. I know, oh gosh, it was the turn of the millennium when I went on a short program to get my clean and press. I never clean and pressed 300. So at the turn of the millennium, I made a decision to do it. And fortunately, I was a good cleaner, so I didn't have to worry too much about that. And I got my clean and press one time, two 45s on each side, a 35 and a 2.5, and I pressed it. I don't know if it would have been okay in a competition because, I did that vertical bench press again, but hey, I got it up, locked it out, and stuck my head through the window, as we say. After that, I was strong enough to do anything I ever needed to do. And as I often tell people, 2004, 5, and 6, and 7 were by far the best years of my athletic career when I was in my late 40s, 47 to 50 years old. And I think the reason is because I was doing so many clean and press with the barbell at the millennium, and then preparing for the RKC certs with the clean and press and the rite of passage program. So I agree, high five to you. I think that's a great idea. Or as my friend Julius Caesar used to tell me, hey Dan, high five. For those you don't who are listening, I just made the peace sign or the V, but why that's funny is I said Julius Caesar gave me a high five, and I made the Roman numeral 5 with my fingers. And when you have to explain a joke that much, I think it's even funnier. All right, thank you. Spence asks a question, and I've been there, done that with Spence. And I think as I read it, preparing for today, I just want to say, Spence, that's part of your job, man, but hang in there. You'll see my point in a minute. I coached large groups of high school athletes, roughly 250 kids, across various sports and abilities. I used to do that, my friend, and hats off to any of you who can deal with the teenage athlete and the numbers we have in the gym. It gets harder every year, I think. We perform bar hangs and pull-ups as staples of our program, which I like. I've tried having athletes use suspension trainers to do vertical standing pull-ups until their feet ultimately come off the ground. I like that. We increase the height when they achieve a certain number of reps per set, 10 as an example. This is really good at the current level. Eventually, they're doing regular pull-ups, but it takes a ton of time. Right. And we'll continue the question. However, I wanted to get your thoughts on whether or not you think only dead hangs from a bar done for an extended period of time will eventually yield the ability to perform pull-ups. This would be easier for us to track, set up, and break down. I appreciate all input. So Spence, you are right there in what makes coaching high school so difficult and joyful. But it also is about teaching. I got a picture from my lawyer the other day because he was getting ski lessons, and he was getting professional ski lessons from one of my former students, and I loved it. It was great to see Paul and Barney in this one picture. And the reason I say that is my attorney is a former student of mine, and the person you go for professional ski lessons is a former student of mine. My doctor's a former student of mine, and my mortician, who I've got all the information right over there. It says estate planning documents, because when I die, my former student's going to take care of me. Part of the joy of being a high school teacher is sitting in a chair 31 years after these guys graduated and going, yeah, they did okay. It takes time. How long does it take a high school boy to go from a ninth grade, hi coach, to a senior American football player? Well, it takes 4 years. I threw the discus 103 feet as a freshman. I threw it 170 as a senior. It takes time. It took 4 years, or 3 years, for me to add, math's always a problem, 67 feet to my personal record. And then after that, I really jumped up when I finally hit puberty when I was in college. So it's okay when teaching a movement takes time. The pull-up is one of those exercises where you're going to get a kid the first day, never done a pull-up, will do 14 to 25 pull-ups. It's the way they're wired, it's their body weight, it's all those other things. You're going to have a kid right next to him who's going to be your starting middle linebacker and knock the stuffing out of people in games who struggles to do one. Well, which one's better? Well, for what? Of all the exercises I ever worked with in both my coaching high school and my career as a trainer coach, the pull-up is the one that makes me fold my arms and go, man, it is just all over the place. I think your idea of these vertical pull-up with assistance is great. Now, I do think you can increase pull-ups by hanging with straight arms, and after a month of hanging with straight arms, a month of hanging with the chin. Okay, the chin has the skin here. That's not the chin, whatever that is called, that flat area of the chin. It must have a name. I mean, I know it's the jaw. Okay, we'll call it the jaw line, but it's not there. But right there, they hold here, and the moment it comes off, it's over. And you build up over time. It's interesting to do that because you might have somebody who can do 15 pull-ups, but can't hold at the top there. I learned that at my first RKC. The difference between touching your skin at the top of a pull-up versus going boom and dropping out of it. Night and day. I like what you're doing. I'm just reminding you, Spence, and I'd remind this to anybody coaching youth at any level. It takes time. In the same way, my grandson Leo knows how to count. I don't know how many numbers he can count up to now, but let's say it's 12, because 11's a tough word to say for a little kid. Well, pretty soon he's going to learn to put them together, then subtract numbers, and then multiply, then divide. Do you remember learning the multiplication tables? I mean, I look back on them now, and it's funny because I rarely use them anymore because of, the computers and the phones. But, learning the 4 times 7 versus 5 times, it takes time. And then there's algebra and geometry and trigonometry. So math, we give math 14, 15, 20 years before we expect people to be good at math. But when we get in the weight room, for whatever reason, we just expect things to click overnight. I would keep doing what you're doing and maybe add more just sag hangs. That's where you just hang on to the bar and just let your body weight pull you down. And then those flex arm hangs. But I think you're doing the right stuff. And anybody who works with teenagers, anybody who helps anybody, hats off to you, and thank you so much. Wow, that was it. That's episode 280. Each and every week I sit down here, I answer your questions. If you have a question, please send them to the podcast at danjohnuniversity.com. I'll be more than happy to answer them. And until next time, let's all keep on lifting and learning, okay? Thank you. Bye-bye.